All right, everybody, we'll go ahead and get started. So as you can see today, we had a little shakeup in running the sessions. Kyle is on his way to a important meeting with the other AGAs across the Midwest. So he's on the call in the background, but I'm going to be leading today's session. So welcome, everybody. Again, today's our fifth week together. And we will be continuing this as we go into March. And today, what our plan is, excuse me, is to go over, finish bunkers up, and then go through the crossing section. And then hopefully we'll have about 20-ish minutes at the end. We're going to take that time to go back and we're going to sort of review the things that we've been doing. And then also talk a little bit more about how to actually fill out your Form 1 and do a little bit of review on filling out a Form 1. So first, let's finish up bunkers real quick. So what you'll notice, so some of this is a review from last week because I think we got a little bit of the way through this. But remember that bunkers are an evaluation of how they come into play and how difficult they are to recover from. And remember, you're going to need to have your green target value in order to evaluate bunkers. And then you're also going to be evaluating based on the fraction of the green that's closely bordered. That is, as we talked about, with columns in the sheet. And then also the difficulty to recover from bunkers. That comes into play mostly with the adjustments. Again, as well, remember that any sloping ground that would otherwise be mounding that's part of a bunker complex counts under bunkers and not under R&R for mounding. And then also, we also have to understand that the tables assume that a fairway bunker exists. And for a scratch player, that means that the bunker needs to be near the landing zone. So that's that 20 yards from the edge of the landing zone to be considered near. And then for the bogey player, it just has to be anywhere along the line of play. And then the bunker fraction, bunker depth, as we said last time, is part of the measuring team's responsibility. So that information will be found on your Form 1. Actually, I have a sample Form 1 that we'll be using earlier today. And I can show you that a lot of times, if you look right here and where it says green side column, it'll have either a 1, that just means the column, or it'll have the 2 and then the depth greater than 3. So column 2, depth is greater than 3. So you'd go over to column 2, find your table value, and then add the D plus adjustment for being greater than 3 for your player. So next, so as we said before, bunkers, so the table values assume that we have a fairway bunker in the case. Any bunker rating for the hole is based only on fairway, would be based only on fairway bunkers as follows. So basically there's a couple different scenarios that you'll run into on the golf course. The one is the standard scenario, which is basically that there is a fairway bunker, there are greenside bunkers, so you're just rating basically accordingly because you've put a yes in for the fairway bunker. Another scenario that'll come up a lot is the case where bunkers don't exist in the fairway, but they do exist at the green. So then you're just going to apply that N- adjustment. But there's a couple of pieces here, because if we remember back to our book, the do not, at the beginning of these sessions, there was the does not exist principle, which means that if a certain obstacle doesn't exist within 50 yards of the line of play or the center of the green for the case of things behind the green, then the obstacle basically does not exist. So for example, if you've ever played, there's a couple courses around the state that have absolutely 0 bunkers whatsoever. And so every hole is just, a tee, a fairway, and a green. There's no bunkers whatsoever. So that means that the bunkers are going to be a 0 for all of those holes, or any hole that doesn't exist. And then if a fairway bunker exists, So a fairway bunker exists, but then at the green, there's nothing that's deemed as a greenside bunker. So there's nothing been added to your Form 1 that would suggest that a greenside bunker is there. And you look around and there's no greenside bunker, but there's a fairway bunker that applies. Then the minimum rating is going to be a 1. So you're going to have a 1 is going to be indicated in there for your player. And then you're going to take that number of a 1, and then you're also could consider if there's any adjustments. So if there's adjustments on that fairway bunker, then you would add that to the 1. But if there's a fairway bunker, your base value is automatically going to be a 1 or greater in that case. And adjustments can only be applied for fairway bunkers that are near a landing zone. So for example, the bogey player, as I said, the bunker for it to exist as a fairway bunker simply needs to be along the line of play. So for example, you may have a situation where the bunker is not near the landing zone. So therefore, for the adjustment to apply, it has to actually be within the landing zone or near the landing zone for that player. So for the bogey player, even, yes, the bunker applies because it's along the play of the hole, but that bunker needs to be in the landing zone to actually record the adjustments on top of that. Yeah, I'm gonna try to mute everyone up. I think we're good. So next, we have the green. This is the page in your book with all the adjustments. So I'll go through these real briefly, just to kind of show some examples of what we have here. So the first one is the Q adjustment, which is a shot specific adjustment. And it's what's called a bunker squeeze sometimes when you're on the course. An obstacle squeeze occurs because the distance between bunkers and that border both sides of the fairway landing zone are less than 30 yards, or in other cases, less than 20 yards, to get the 2+ adjustment on that. So basically that's when you have bunkers that are at the landing zone. There's a bunker on each side of that landing zone, within that landing zone. And as a result, it squeezes to be within that 30-yard range. So for example, if we go down to this picture here, you'll see that, let's say your landing zone was along this red line, and that was inside your landing zone. You'll see that there's a bunker on the left and a bunker on the right. So we see that's 13 yards from the center to the right, 16 yards from the center to the left. So you add that together, you get 29 yards. So as a result, you're less than 30. So you'd apply the Q+ adjustment right here, because we're less than 30 yards away in between the bunkers. Obviously, we need it to be less than 20 for the obstacle squeeze to apply with the 2+. Now, generally, you may frequently see the Q+1 in the fairway. Generally, the only time you'll really ever see a Q+2 is when you're up. Now this is not always the case, but a lot of the time you'll see maybe the Q+2 when you're approaching the green, and let's say you're on a 3-shot hole and your landing zone is significantly close to the front of the green. Sometimes those bunkers that front the front of the green will cause you to be inside of that 20-yard range inside your landing zone. So that's really where you really want to watch for that Q+ while you're on the golf course. Then we go into the C+, which is you get there's 2 different options for +1. One's in the fairway, one is in the green. So the first one is that the fairway player must carry a significant bunker to reach a fairway landing zone. For the scratch player, the bunkers must be near the start of the fairway landing zone. For the bogey player, the bunkers may be anywhere along the line of play. And then at the green, the player must carry bunkers that protect a significant portion of the green. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to Google Earth here, because I have an example for you of a course. Now, the case of fairway bunkers in the fairway that cause a carry adjustment is not a very frequent occurrence, I have to say. However, it can be at certain courses, it can come into play quite a bit. So for example, this is the 14th hole at Saginaw Valley Public. This is where I played college golf at. So I'm very familiar with this course, and that's why I picked this out. As you can see here, there's this cross bunker that plays into the fairway right here. So if I go to my measure tool here and I go into yards, I can see that. So there's two different ways to look at this, and we're going to see one option where we're not going to apply the carry, and one where we're going to apply the carry for our players. So for example, if I go from the blue tees, which would be back here, what you'll see is that for me to cross this bunker, it has to fly 248 in the air, basically, or 244, whatever, in the air to get there. So for example, to actually hit it to my full landing zone where it's here, I'm not really carrying the bunker because I'm landing at 230. So I'm landing way back here. So the ball isn't going to actually make it through that bunker. So in this case, it would be one where maybe you would effectively play the player out in this direction with our scratch player. Now, alternatively, I gotta move this. Alternatively, if I go in and I'm looking from the white tee here, what we'll notice is, this is right about at the beginning of my scratch player's landing zone, and I'm crossing that bunker. So this is 231. So that's where my scratch player's 230 is where my scratch player is going to come out of the air. So my scratch player can completely clear that bunker. And as a result, that is near, because it's within 20 yards, it's near the front edge of my landing zone. So in this case, I would play my player to their full 250, and then I would apply the C plus under fairway to that fairway bunker that's located in the fairway there. And now for another example, as we also talked about carries, this is an example of a carry at the green scenario. So the first thing we have to remember when we talk about carry at the green is it applies if it covers if a bunker in front of the green that you must carry covers a significant portion of the green. That's the first piece. The second piece is for the bogey player, if it covers a significant portion of the green, it automatically applies. For the scratch player, our green target has to be a 5 or greater for it to apply. So first, what we'll do is, let's say we know we're hitting a shot from here on the 11th hole, and we're coming in here to the green. Now, what you'll notice is that, maybe that's our shot there. And basically what we notice is that over half the green requires a carry over a greenside bunker, both here and some of this edge over here. So we would consider that to be a significant portion of the green that is covered by the bunkers that you must carry at the green. Mm-hmm. So in this case, we would consider this to be a significant portion, and therefore, if the green target was 5 or more, we'd apply it to the scratch, the C plus, and we'd apply the C plus to the bogey regardless. All right, let's get back to the PowerPoint here. All right, so the next adjustment that we have to consider is the E plus adjustment, which is for an extreme bunker. So there's a couple different ways that we can consider an extreme bunker. So the first one is a pot bunker or a stacked sod bunker. So an image that may come into your mind is, for example, at St. Andrews or at several of the courses on the Open Championship Rota. We'll have courses that have stacked sod bunkers or pot bunkers that have steep, sheer cliffs down into the trap. So in those cases, that would qualify for an extreme bunker. Those obviously aren't very common in Michigan. There may be a few occasions here and there where that comes into play. The second is that extreme rough interferes with swing. So an example of this would be particularly at some courses that are more link style courses, you'll have a bunker and then you'll have a patch of fescue on the top of the lip of the bunker. And so if you have that and it makes a significant impact potentially on the swing of the player or potentially on the ability of the ball to get out of the bunker, then you'd consider applying the E plus there. And then another one is large bunker or a series of bunker that causes long carries over sand. To qualify, the bunker must be closely bordering the green or the fairway landing. So it always has to closely border the green or the fairway landing zone for it to apply for an E adjustment. But an example of this case with long carries over sand is this image down here. So for example, if your landing zone is back in here, let me get out my little draw feature here. If your landing zone is, this part right here, let's say, and you got this bunker right here is what you're dealing with. So there's a couple things that you're looking for here. So the first thing you'll notice is, if I go to a different color, what you'll notice is you have right here, you have a patch of fescue, which may make it an impact. And the second piece is that if you hit it in this bunker here and your direction of play is back this direction, you'll see that you have to carry all the way to here across all of the sand to get there. The same would be true if you were over on the left side here and you were in this bunker. You would have to carry all of the sand back to get back to the fairway on your line of play. So in this case, you would consider using an E if you were back in these bunkers. While in the case, if your landing zone was, let's erase all this. Let's say your landing zone is up in this area, per se. So now you maybe have this bunker that you're dealing with. Well, it depends on where you're at, but if this fescue doesn't really come into play, then you might not give the E, but this fescue is probably going to come into play, so you may also give the E as well. So that's part of that. Just depends where your landing zone is and how likely you are to be in this segment of the bunker where the fescue doesn't come into play as much, and this segment of the bunker where it does come into play as far as where your landing zone is. All righty, let's clear that out. All right. All right, so we have a question in the chat. For an E+1 on extremely difficult, what is the meaning of closely bordering the green? So that means that, so for a bunker to count and for a bunker to show up under greenside bunkers, it means that the bunker has to be closely bordering the green, which means that it has to be within 10 yards of the edge of the green for it to count. So when we measure the green to figure out what column and what percentage of the green is closely bordered by bunkers, what we do is we take the entire circumference of the green and we look at that. And then we say, okay, then we go back around the green and we go, this segment of the green's circumference is closely bordered within 10 yards by a bunker. And then we go around to maybe where the next bunker is and do the same thing. And then we add all of that up. And then that tells us what portion of the green is closely surrounded by bunkers. And then we take that value, use the columns, and then put it in. So if a bunker shows up as a greenside bunker in the greenside row of the Form 1, that means that it is automatically closely bordering the green, and then you would apply the E as applicable. So the last piece here is with bunkers is bunker depth. So the depth of a greenside bunker is measured from points where recovery shots are made. And this work is done by the measuring team. So the biggest thing that you need to do is you need to be comfortable with using the greenside bunker depth adjustment table. What you'll notice is that men are on top in the blue, women are on the bottom in the yellow, and there's different values for each. So basically what we do when we measure and we actually put it on the Form 1 is that we use whatever the greater value is, whatever the greatest value that it qualifies for. So for example, if you see on your sheet, column 1 greater than 2 feet, then it only applies for D+ for the women, for people who are rating the women's tees, the women's sets of tees and sets of ratings. If it says greater than 3 feet, then we are giving a +1 to the men and to the women in their ratings. If it says greater than 5 feet, then we're giving a 2+ to women and we're giving a 1+ to men, and so on and so forth. So we're only going to give the single number that applies to, that is basically what the bunker is measured at. And then if it doesn't exactly match the gender that you are rating for, then you go into the chart and you say, oh, it says, I'm rating for men. It says it's greater than 5 feet, but I don't have an option for greater than 5 feet. So I'm using the greater than 3 feet because that's the one that applies to me. So I would apply the +1. So for example, let's real quickly go into this, into the Form 1 real quick. So one thing that you may have, so if you have an adjustment, you'll see that there's a row in bunkers for fairway, and there's a row of for green side as well. So a couple things I want to indicate real quick for you is that in the case here where it says fairway, this is where we're going to put our yes or no when it comes to fairway bunker. So for example, on this hole, if I said, okay, I do have a fairway bunker for my scratch player, then I would put the Y in here, and then the Y would automatically apply if it applies for the scratch. If for some reason there wasn't a fairway bunker, but there was in the landing zone for my scratch, then I would go in and then I would put in the N-. And then as long as there is the fairway bunker present along the course of the hole, that's a horrible N, but you get the point. And then I would, if there is the fairway bunker along the course of the hole, I would still have the Y there. If there's no fairway bunkers along the course of the hole, then I would apply the N under fairway bunkers there as well. And then you're just going to apply your adjustments alongside the table values. And something you also notice when you use the Form 1 is sometimes the form only will autofill in one of the columns. But for example, on this hole, you'll see that there's a 1 here in the scratch column. That 1 also applies over in the bogey column as well. It's just that the Excel macro doesn't apply that over necessarily. So you're going to put the 1, you basically can copy the 1 over as well into the green side column for the bogey. All righty, let's keep this thing coming up. All right. That's an update. I think that's an old update for there. But it's just something that kind of goes with trees obstructing the shot. I'm assuming this is an update from last year. But there's a difference, and we will talk about the O adjustment when we get to trees. So I'm not gonna complicate things more than they need to be today. Yes, absolutely. And in the comments, Kyle put a little description in there. An important word for the extreme adjustment is punitive. So it's even though the E adjustment is somewhat subjective, we just have to remember that we want to make sure that it is a punitive piece as well. And also, as Connie put in the chat, things that occur greenside generally apply to all players. The only thing with bunkers that won't inherently apply to all players is that carry adjustment, because that will only apply to the scratch if we get a 5 or greater end green target. All right, so now we're going to move into crossing obstacles real quick. This should be a pretty simple obstacle to cover. So a crossing obstacle is any penalty areas, extreme rough, including desert. We really don't have desert in Michigan, and out of bounds, which are carried to play the hole. Multiple crossings on a hole are evaluated separately for each shot. Ratings are based on the length of the shot that's required to safely carry, which means 10 yards beyond the far margin of the obstacle. So if you're, let's just imagine you're standing on a par 3 and it's 150 yards, and you have 120 yards to the far end of the pond that you're hitting over, then we have to add 10 yards onto that, which would make it 130. And that's where we're really going to evaluate, is that it's a 130-yard carry to safely carry. Short carries over obstacles can result in a 0 obstacle value. And when a crossing obstacle exists and there's no lateral obstacle rating value, a value of 1 is recorded under lateral obstacles. So basically what this means is that there are some carries, depending on what player you're rating for, in which a certain length carry will not count as a crossing obstacle. So there will be cases where you will have a crossing recorded on your sheet, but it'll end up being a 0 will be the actual value. And then what we're going to do is, if there is that situation exists, then to satisfy the exist concept, we're going to consider that that is a value of 1 for lateral as kind of a tangent on lateral. Is that most of the time when you're rating a golf course, you're going to have a lateral obstacle value of some sort. So it sometimes doesn't apply. But there are occasions where you may not have any lateral obstacles, but you have a crossing obstacle, and you get a 0 for crossings. So because you had no lateral obstacles, now you just carry that 1 over, and you're going to put a 1 in for your lateral obstacle as a result. So just remember that this is another case where one obstacle affects the other obstacle. If you get a 0 for crossing obstacles, but you actually physically had a crossing, then always remember that you will at least have a 1 for lateral as a result. So crossing is here. So these are the tables. So for example, just as I was saying, for the scratch man, you're going to need 100 yards for it to qualify. For the bogey man, you're going to need 50. For the scratch woman, you're going to need 25. For the bogey woman, you're going to need 30 for it to qualify. And then you just look up in the chart for whatever player you're doing, find the table value as a result. So there's a couple other pieces that play in a role here. So with adjustments on crossings are pretty simple. The first one is a carry adjustment over a crossing obstacle if it closely borders the front of the green. So what that means is, we just talked about closely bordering. If the edge of the penalty area is within 10 yards of the front edge of the green, then we'd apply a carry adjustment. So for example, if I go up here, let's pretend that the seawall and the front edge of the green is less than 10 yards apart, then I'm going to apply that C+. But in this case, it looks like probably it isn't. So we're not going to apply the actual C+ adjustment on crossings. But we always want to be cognizant when we have a crossing, particularly at the green. We always want to be cognizant that we need to make sure that the distance from the front edge to the green to the edge of the penalty area generally is not less than 10 yards. Because if it is, then we need to go back and apply that adjustment. The next one is a percentage. So this is something that applies to crossing and lateral penalty areas. But for crossing penalty areas, it's if a crossing obstacle is narrow or only a partial, partial can be played from some of the time, blah, 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 and considering using appropriate percentage adjustment. So we have 2 images down here. So on this image, let's say you're playing from this tee pad right here, and you're hitting across this. If you hit the ball in that pond right there, you're probably not playing it, right? If you hit it, if you duff it off the tee box and it dribbles into the pond, you're probably not finding it and playing it. If you hit it over here by the fountain, you're not finding it and playing it. So as a result, the penalty area here with this pond is a true penalty area. You have no recovery option from it. You're going to have to come back here, replay off the tee, or take your drop. On the other hand, if you're looking at this wonderful hole here from Flint Golf Club, if you're playing from the tee back here, okay, and you're hitting to this par 3 green over here, this is a crossing right here. So maybe this is, 90 yards to cross this penalty area here, okay? Only if you hit it between this 80 and 90 are you actually in the penalty area where you can't play. So if you dub it off the tee box and you're down here in this rough, you can still hit it again. If you hit it short, you can still hit it again. Even though this isn't necessarily in the book, I mean, if you hit any shot that is coming down into this grass area down here, you're going to find it, and it's recoverable and playable. Even if, let's say, the hazard or the line for the penalty area, the red line was drawn back, along this, back here along the slope that plays right here, even if maybe you were in the penalty area, you could still play it. So as a result, you might consider with this particular shot saying, okay, 25% of the shots that don't cross the the penalty area here, 25% of those shots are going to be playable. So you say, okay, that means I'm going to apply a P- adjustment, because for every 25% of those shots that are playable, and you can advance the ball forward without a significant loss of stroke or distance, you're going to apply that P- adjustment. So here you may consider maybe applying a P-1. You may consider applying a P-2. It all kind of depends on what the condition of this is and what the recoverability options from down here are, is where you would do that. But again, to kind of highlight what we were talking about earlier, when you look here as well, so when we have this and we're measuring this on your Form 1, this will, because it's a par 3, this will be recorded as a crossing off the tee generally on your Form 1. So basically what that means we've done is we've been over here at the tee. This is our teeing ground, and we've measured what is 10 yards across, and then we've put a reflector right there. What we've done is we've measured this to this. So this is your effective crossing distance that you have here. Now, another way of looking at this is, okay, if this wasn't a one-shot hole, what would your Form 1 actually say? So something that isn't on or isn't in the book, but we use on our Form 1s is what's called an Asl number. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you. So for example, consider that these tees don't exist, and this is a long par 4 hole, let's say. Okay, and your fairway and your landing zone is back somewhere back in here, and you're hitting across this. So because every player's landing zone and every rater is going to have a different landing zone, we can't, during measuring, go through and measure what is every single person's crossing going to be. So let's say from back here, we are hitting from 150 yards is where our landing zone is to the center of the green. So what the measuring crew will do is they will go to this penalty area and they will measure 10 yards from the edge of there, and they'll put a reflector in. And then when they're up in the green, they'll find, okay, what is the center of the green? So let's just hypothetically say that's what we say is the center of the green. This distance between the center of the green and this point of safely carry is what we write on the sheet as an ASL number. So it'll say, under crossing, it'll say ASL minus whatever. So let's say hypothetically in this case, the measuring team says this is ASL minus 40 is our number to cross our ASL is our distance from the center of the green back to the point where we can safely cross. So if we're sitting here at 150 and we are hitting from the fairway into this particular so let's say 150 is our bogey player. We're rating for men. We have a rating from 150 and we have our scratch player is hitting from 100, let's say. So when we go up to our bogey player's site, we're going to say, okay, it's 150. The ASL is 40. So our actual crossing value, the length that we need to cross the penalty area by a safe distance to safely carry, is 150 minus 40 is 110. So our actual carry value that we're going to apply when we do the crossing table is 110. So in this example, we may say, okay, it's 110. We go into our book. So let's say, let me open my crossing book. So we go into our book, we go over to bogey because we're dealing with the bogey. We say, okay, it's 110. So that's the 100 to 124. We go over, we see that that's a value of 4. So 4 is our base value. And then we might apply a P- because of this grass that's in front. We don't have to completely carry all the way. So maybe we'll P- that and then give it a value of 3. The same thing here, if we have our scratch player at 100, 100 minus 40 is 60. Okay. And so we take 60 and we go over to the scratch and we say, oh, well, 60-yard carry doesn't apply. So our crossing value for the scratch is going to be a 0. And then we consider, okay, is there a lateral obstacle? If not, then we apply that 1 over to the lateral if we don't have anything in lateral. All right, so let's see. There's a chat in there. Yes, approach shot length. Thanks, Kyle. That is what ASL stands for, and obviously that's an easy way to be able to tell you the information from the rating crew, be able to tell you the information that's required, so that you can calculate your crossing values as well. All right, so that's basically it with crossing. Besides, actually, no, there is one more thing. The other thing is something that rarely applies, but it may apply, is this two adjustment. So if a crossing obstacle comes into play on 2 or more shots, each rating must be 5 or greater, plus adjustments. The adjustment is made to the highest of the separate shot evaluation. So if you have 2 different crossings, so let's say you're playing a par 5, a 3-shot hole, and you have a long crossing off the tee, and then there's another pond in front of the green. So and then when you play your approach shot into the green, you're having another crossing. You evaluate that and say, okay, are both of those crossing values a 5 or greater? If both of those are a 5 or greater, then we apply the 2 plus. And then if those total, if they total 11 or less, so if they total 10 or 11, we only apply the +1 onto the highest value. And then if they are a 12 or greater, when we add those together, then we apply the +2. But that's something that rarely comes into play. That will come into play probably a significant time on lateral. It comes in maybe every other rate that you'll do. You might have one of those for lateral, but it doesn't inherently come into play a significant part when it comes to crossings. All righty, so that is the end of this part of our session. If there's no further questions, what we're going to do is kind of go into the second piece of our session today, which is going to be to kind of look a little bit more at Form 1s and kind of help some of our new people here kind of get more familiar and more comfortable with a Form 1. So what we're going to do today is we may get through 2 holes. We may only get through the first hole here, but what we're going to do is we're basically going to go on Google Earth and we're going to rate a sample hole. So for this, because it's the simplest course to do this for, because of the lack of significant elevation change, I'm going to go in here to Saginaw Country Club and see if my computer will work for me, because that would be really nice. And the nice thing about Google Earth is I can go in here and completely rotate this. And what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be rating the 8th hole here at Saginaw Country Club, because it has a lot of the themes that we've been talking about over the past week or two here. So basically what I did is this is the 8th hole right here. And what we did is I went into the Form 1 and I created what a sample Form 1 hole would look like for this player. And so we're going to rate this for men as we go down it. So what we'll notice, we're basically going to pretend that we're on the golf course and that we're going down the hole and rating. And then we're going to, I'm going to bring in some values into this chart on our Form 1, just so that you can see how this is kind of filled out in these last 20 minutes. So the first thing we're going to do is when we get to the teeing ground here, I measured over here, there's another teeing ground. There's a left teeing ground right here. What we're going to do is when we first drive up to the tee box, a lot of times we'll get out and we'll say, okay, do we see anything from the tee box that looks concerning? And so from the teeing ground on this hole, we don't necessarily see anything that looks extremely concerning as a result. So what we're going to do is we're going to drive down the fairway to where we will be at our target landing zone. So if I go back over to our Form 1, we see that the hole is measured at 510 yards in length. So what that means is that we're going to have, this is going to be a 2 landing zone hole for each player. So for the bogey player, sometimes what I'll do is when I do my sheet is I will go to the bottom under notes and I will type in what are the exact landing zones for each of my player. So for my scratch player, I have 510. So if I subtract 250 from that, my landing zones are going to be at 260. And then they are going to, the second one is going to be at 40, which is recorded on my sheet. And then I'm going to go over, and for my bogey, I'm going to write my landing zones as well before I go out there. So I take 200 off of 510. That means my landing zone's at 310. And then my next landing zone is at the 140, where my shot into the green will be. So now that I have those numbers there, I'm on the course and I got my GPS unit or my cell phone with a GPS. And what I need to do is I need to find, okay, what is 310 yards from the center of the green? So I drive down the fairway and okay, I have it. And there's my 310 yard point. So while I'm on the fairway, I'm saying, okay, this is my point here. So now I'm evaluating all of the things that I may have to evaluate. So at the landing zone, there's a couple things we're going to evaluate. So the first is I'm going to go back into my sheet and I'm going to see, okay, I need to evaluate topography for this particular landing zone. So for the example of Saginaw Country Club, is because the course is so flat and there's just a little roll to the land, we're just going to say that every landing zone for this hole, or for this hole that we're rating today, is going to be a minor to moderate problem. So we're going to give an MM for this. But because this is a 2 landing zone hole, when I record this in my Form 1, I'm going to, with pencil, go into topography, and right here under my bogey player, I'm going to just write MM because I can't give an elevation for this. So I'm going to go in and write MM there. And then I'm going to go back to my thing here, and I'm going to start a new, I know that I'm right about here. I'm going to measure what is the fairway width. So the first thing you'll notice is at Saginaw Country Club, they cut an intermediate cut of rough. So what that means is that I have to measure half of that rough. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, at this point, click on the edge of the fairway and go over to the edge of the cut of primary rough. And I'm going to see, okay, my fairway width is 26. And I have no particular adjustments that I need to make on here. So I go back to my sheet, and land zone 1 is 26. All right, so I've recorded all that information. I've looked at the hole. Now I'm going to go back to my hole and I'm going to start new again. And now I'm going to go up to where my scratch player's landing zone is at 260. So I'm going to measure back. Let's see if this is 260 right here. I'm going to go in. I'm going to say, okay, my lie is another MM. So I'm going to go in my sheet here, and under this, I'm going to go MM again. And then I'm going to go back to here, and then I'm going to say, okay, I'm back in the fairway again. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to measure my fairway width from the edge of the fairway to this edge of the primary cut. I'm going to say, okay, that is 29. So now I go back to my sheet. I go to land zone 1. I have 29 for my fairway. And all right, so I've done those 2 primary landing zones. So that normally the first landing zone on a par 5 is pretty simple. I've evaluated also while I was doing this, and this is, we haven't really got to this yet, is that as a result of, my distance from the center to what would be the nearest lateral, I don't have a lateral that exists on this hole. So I'm going to say that the lateral does not exist on this hole as well. So then now I'm at 140, and this is where things are going to start to get a little more complicated. So I'm going to measure out to 140 and find where my bogey player is going to be coming into the green from, which is right here. All right. And now what I'm going to notice is a couple things when I'm at this landing zone. The first one I'm going to notice is I have a crossing up here at some point. The second thing I'm going to notice is that there's this fairway bunker right here that is within a near range of my line of play. So even though, because this is my bogey player, even though this is not within my landing zone, I do have a fairway bunker. So I'm going to go in here, and under the bogey player for bunkers, I'm going to put a Y in because I do have a fairway bunker. Now I'm going to go back and now I'm going to evaluate the landing zone. So first of all, I go in here and I say, oh, well, you know, it's not a significant, it's still MM, and my shot into the green has 0 elevation change. So now I go back here and I look at, okay, I had MM first, I have 0 MM again. So I'm going to put 0 elevation change / MM, and that's going to be what I'm going to record in here for the hole, because I had the MM and the 0 MM in the fairway. I had a 0 MM on my approach shot into the green. So 0 MM is the shot that's going to prevail on this hole. Then I'm going to go back in and I'm going to measure my fairway width. So I'm going to estimate this because I can't really see. So my fairway width is, let's say, 28 at this point. So I go to fairway landing zone or bogey, and I put in a 28. And then now I'm pretty much done, besides the fact that I need to evaluate that crossing that's coming. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to start new, and I'm going to look at this. So my approach shot was in from 140 yards was my approach shot into the green. And I have an ASL -24. So what that says to me is that my crossing at the green, the value of that is going to be 140 minus 24, which is 116 yards. So I might, under my bogey here, I may write in 116 as my crossing. Now, another thing you'll notice is when I'm looking at this, I'm evaluating from here, looking at this, I have, roughly 90 yards or so of fairway in front of the green that does not really apply as a crossing. It's only this little stream that I'm crossing. So what I may do here is I may choose as a result to P- this. So I'm going to go into my thing, and because this is a shot specific thing, I'm going to write a little P- next to my 116 so that I know that I'm going to P- that particular carry. And so I've already done all that. I haven't adjusted my green target length. What about the tree that obstructs the approach shot landing area? So that's obviously a good question. So right here, there's this tree that obstructs the landing zone. So that's a good catch. If I go under fairway, I could say this would apply mostly to fairway because we're going to have under our W, it says if the fairway width is effectively reduced by overhanging tree branches in the landing zone. So this being our landing zone, there are some overhanging tree branches that obviously make a play. So that's a good catch. And this is why, with that comment, this is why it's so important to talk these things over at the green when you're done with the hole. It's because I didn't even think about this being an overhanging branch over the landing zone. So as a result, that may potentially force me to narrow the width of the fairway down. And because we only want to apply this tree as one thing, we are going to apply this potentially as a W plus. And as well, yes, keep in mind where the ball hits the ground. It may hit the ground before the trees. So that's another thing to consider. And that's another comment that may come up at the green. So if I go back, if 140 is my landing zone, okay, and I'm here, okay, the ball is coming out of the air 20 yards back at 160. So if I look back to 160, that tree is still obstructing a decent chunk of my landing zone, even though it's kind of here. So this is kind of one where you may have to consider a couple different options here. So the first one is, yes, does the tree technically obstruct some of the landing zone? Potentially. But does the tree obstruct completely the landing zone? And with this being such a narrow fairway as it is, it's only 29 yards wide. We would probably consider refraining from using a W plus adjustment, simply because we have already a narrow fairway, so we're going to have a high fairway value, and this tree does not really obstruct a significant portion of the fairway. Now, if you were coming out of the air at 140 and you were rolling up to 120, then there is this significant, I mean, there's almost a third of the fairway being taken up. But if you're coming out of the air back here, you may not apply that W plus. And in this case, I would say at the green, after discussion, we would ultimately decide to not apply a W plus in this particular scenario. Alrighty, so next we're going to go up and look at our scratch player's target zone. Why can't I zoom? That would help. So our scratch player is at 40, but we have a problem. So basically what we have here is a case where the scratch player's layup is within 10 yards of a penalty area. So as a result, we say, okay, the scratch player technically cannot hit a full shot per se, but there's another thing at play here, is that this penalty area is not, and the preceding layup that you would need to make is not within 10 yards, or is not going to create a difference of more than 10 yards. And as a result, we may not actually technically apply a layup here. So what we're going to do is I'm going to say, okay, this is 40, and let's say this is my point that I'm laying up to, is right here, is at the edge of the fairway, is where my full shot would actually get to. So then I'm going to say, I'm just going to measure this from here to here. I'll notice that, you know, my layup, if I got, you know, 4 yards to there, you know, my layup is going to be back in here. So basically, when I go and look at my ASL number, I got ASL minus 24. So if I subtract that, that's 16 yards from the front edge of the green is where my player is going. So I may not even necessarily look at that. I may look just at the 40, subtract the 24 from the front edge, and then also look at it from this perspective. If I go back 16 yards, okay, I'm actually right there. So the biggest takeaway from this is that when we have an ASL on the sheet, use it, because the ASL on the sheet is going to be more accurate. You may think you know where the center of the green is, and you may think that your GPS knows where the center of the green is, but just as I made a small error there on finding where the center of the green was, also, you know, it would have made an error with my ASL number. So now if I look here, if my shot is here at 40, okay, and this is where my end of my landing zone actually is, if I actually use the ASL number, I know that I have 40 is my total shot length, but now I have to adjust all this because I actually have to lay up, because if I'm coming out of the air, you know, instead of 16 yards back from the front edge, I'm coming out of the air 36 yards back. It's not going to roll through this creek. So now I have to consider, okay, how much do I actually need to lay up to be 10 yards back? So to cross the penalty area is 21. So I need to be 31 yards from the front edge of the green is where my actual layup is, because I want to lay up 10 yards short of there. So I'm now 31 yards from the front edge of the green. So I add 31 to my front edge calculation here. As I go back here, so I'm 31 from the front edge, so I know that the green depth is 32 yards. So we know that we have 16 yards of green depth to the center. So I add 16 on top of what I had here, which was 31 yards. So 16 and 31 is 47 yards. So my new approach shot length is actually going to be 47. Wait a minute. Nope, it should be 57, right? 31 plus 16. It's 47. Why am I? There's that. So if I go back to my form one, let me go back to the form one. So I had an approach shot length of 40. Yes, 47 is correct. Okay. Good. All right. So 47 yards is correct. It's my approach shot, adjusted approach shot length. So what I'm going to do is I have to lay up here. So I'm going to actually adjust my my approach shot length to be 47. So wait, hang on. I'm going to cross out. Generally, I cross out my stuff here. And then I'm going to go up here to adjusted approach shot and type in 47. And what that also forces me to do is then go back. Should you measure ASL from the green center, not the front? So we have ASL is 24. Yes, that's right, Connie. See, this is where I okay. So if I have 24 is the green center minus the 16 yards of change. So really 8 is my center. So again, we then roll into, okay, I've really botched this. So I got this. So I have 24 to the center. I'm subtracting my 8 back. And then I'm going to go back and I'm going to lay up, because if I'm coming out of the air, 20 yards back here, I'm now looking at that, back here. So now I have to come 10 yards back from here. So if I come 10 yards back, this is a lot of numbers. If I come 10 yards back to here, I have, 10. So now I know that my number is there. And then I go from that point, measure to the front edge. That's 31. 31 plus my 16 is 47. And so now I'm going to subtract. I'm going to subtract. I have 47. So my actual layup value here is only going to be 7. So because that is less than 10, I can't actually record it, but I have to record it down here as 47. So then I go to my green target. Effective green diameter is 30 at 47, which is still a 2. So my standard from the table doesn't change, and my green target's still a 2. Now, because I've laid up, though, also here, even though it doesn't record for an effective length adjustment, I also need to make an L- on my fairway value, which I now need to record at 47. So when I go back here, I record my fairway value as 20 yards wide here. So then I go into my form 1, it's 20, but I also have to make the L- because I've laid my player up slightly and they haven't hit a full shot. And then because my L- is here, I need to come down to R and R and put my L- here under R and R. Oh, yes. I guess I wasn't. So yeah, so my force layup here is +7 because I'm making the whole play longer by 7. So the 10 yards only applies to dog legs, and the 7 can apply for force layup. So basically, this is how complicated sometimes the laying up when you have a crossing and whatnot comes into play. So then if I go down here and I say, okay, I have an ASL of 24 on 47. So my crossing value is only going to be 47 minus 24, which is only 23 yards. So when I go down here, I only really have a value of 23. So sometimes you have to fudge it because numbers get in your way. So my crossing value is really only 23, which means that it's basically good. It's going to be a 0 for my scratch regardless. And then I come up here and then I've evaluated as well while I was in the fairway. I evaluate, okay, this is another 0 mm for topo. And so I go up into this. I go 0 mm because both of mine were 0 mm's for everything. And now I pretty much have everything that I need to have from the fairway taken care of. But now I need to go up into the green and take a look around. So what I'll do is I'll come up into the green here I'll go back into 3D mode, just so we can see what it looks like. Get rid of my measurements, and then let's see if I can shift around. For some reason it doesn't want to work. So basically, if I come in here, what you'll see, there's not a whole lot of slope around the green, so I really don't have any R&R adjustments to be made. There's this bunker here that's already been recorded. Yes, absolutely. And just as John said, put your 116 and 23 in the CP boxes. So be sure to put those correctly in these boxes down here as well, just so that your captain has an easy time going through that. But then as we go around here, we see that the bunker's already been recorded in our Form 1. So basically, we don't have a whole lot to do around the green. If we were, doing laterals, which we're not going to do today because we haven't really covered that, we would measure our laterals out. And as you see, you just make sure that they match what's on the Form 1. I've already indicated on the Form 1 what those lateral values would be. And then I now just have to go through and look at some of these and just make sure I didn't miss anything. The first thing I see that I missed is that because my scratch player doesn't have a fairway bunker near their landing zone, I'm going to N minus that, and I will go back and verify real quick to be sure. I know that my landing zone is here now for my layup, somewhere right around in this area. So if I go back 20, and then I go back another 20 to 40, now I have to measure out. So if I go, if I'm somewhere right about there, that is technically in my landing zone. So now that I went back, because if I would have looked at this considering that I would have still been playing the full shot, this wouldn't have been a fairway bunker. But because now I've laid up so far, and then I've looked at, okay, I come out of the air 20 yards back of that, and then 20 yards back of that, I'm near into the landing zone. So actually I do have a Y here. And so then I go through, I look and just make sure everything's good again. And now I'm pretty much good to go in and do all of my table stuff. So real quick, I know we're running just close to the end. If anyone has stretch landing zone 2, is there any lateral adjustment 2 for the rock line ditch? So yes, there will be lateral penalty areas on your second landing zone for the scratch with that creek running to the left. But because we haven't gotten to laterals, I'm not going to cover over any of the lateral stuff yet. But let's go through this real quick and find the table values while you all are here. So basically, if we have a 0 mm on a 2 or more shot hole, we're going to get a 2 there. Same thing because our values apply equally. We're going to have a 2 here for topo for both players. We then go into fairway. Okay, we got 29 here and a 20 with an L minus. So then we have to go in, okay, our hole's 510 yards long. So we're in the bottom column. We say, okay, the first landing zone is 29. So that's going to be a 5. The second landing zone is a 20. That's going to be a 7, but the 7 has an L minus, which makes it a 6. There's a 5 here, a 6 here. So our fairway value is going to be a 6. And then we'll also go over and consider, okay, we have 26 and 28. Both of those are in the same. Those are both going to be 5s. So then we just put in here, we put in our 5 under fairway there. We go in here. We've already said that these standards from the table are still good. We've already checked that 47 is in the same range as 40. So then 2 is still our value. So we can just drop that straight on down. But you do absolutely need to be sure that your standard value is correct if you make any sort of changes to the shot length into the green. So if let's say I made this, 100 yards instead of 40 yards, then absolutely my 2 is going to change to something else, and I need to correct that. Then we go down to R&R. We say, okay, we have a green target of 2 for our scratch. Our rough height is 3 inches, which is indicated up here. So we go down to 2 or 3. We say 2 to 3 inches is still a 3, but we have an L minus for our scratch. So that makes it a 2. We go over, we say, okay, we have a 5 for the bogey, the 5, we go over to the 2 to 3. That's still a 5. So we go into here, we put a 5 for a bogey. Then we now go to our bunkers. We say, okay, we have a yes and a yes on both of those. We're in green side column 1 with no depth adjustment. So we say yes for the scratch. We have a 2. We're in column 1, which makes it a 1. So bunkers exist. So we have a 1. And then we have a green target of 5 for our bogey. We take that over to column 1, and that is a 3. We have a yes, so there's no N minus. And so we just continue with the table value of 3. So then we're now going to go into crossings here real quick. The scratch is 23, which means it doesn't qualify for a crossing value. So for the scratch player, we're going to have a crossing value of 0. The bogey has 116 with a P minus. So we go over here to the right to bogey. We're in the 100 to 124. Go over to 4, go over, and that gives us a table value of 4, but we have the P minus here to remember, and therefore our total value is going to be a 3 for crossings for the bogey. So real quickly, that is kind of how to go through a hole, and kind of it's a good also a simulation with the comments of the kinds of discussions that you'll have on the golf course about your rating values, because even the most experienced raters will miss things on occasion, and even the most experienced raters will make small errors here and there, and that's why it is super important when you're out there rating to consider at the green making sure that you are able to communicate whatever questions you have, and then go over the information that you've put on your sheet, just to make sure that a lot of these common errors that we kind of saw today are resolved before you move on to the next hole. And then when you get into the clubhouse to actually tabulate your sheet, it'll be super easy to do so, because all the information on your sheet will hopefully be correct at that time. Alrighty, so that pretty much sums up our session for today. The quiz on bunkers and crossings is already posted on the Course Rater volunteer page. And so you can go and look there for that, and the video goes along with it. So if anyone has any questions and wants to stick around, please do. If not, we will see you next Thursday. Are there any questions from anyone who's still around?
The course rating form 1.
Yes. need, what's your question? I just saw your email. Yeah, so the course rating form 1, you can find a blank copy of it. It'll be on the course rating volunteer page. There will be at somewhere in the list of resources, there is a copy of a purely blank form 1 that you can use. And actually in the quiz this week, I've recommended that if you need some help organizing some of the stuff from the quiz, be sure to print one of those out and use one.
Thank you.
Yep.
Nice job, Hunter.
Thanks. Alrighty. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and end the meeting then.